Okay, so hi everyone, I'm Julia, and my senior year project is on public art. It's called Environmental Influence and Analysis of the Importance of Location in the Graffiti, Street Art, and Earthworks movements. And you can see the picture in the background. This will look nice when it's framed. That's a Banksy piece, who's a street artist. And that's actually a piece I saw when I was in San Francisco over vacation. So I thought it tied in nicely. So to start off, here's an overview of the three different movements. So graffiti is, it's based on graffiti writers who do tags, which is basically like writing their name or nickname on a wall or train or any surface. And it's based around typography and kind of the stylization and formation of letters, and sometimes it can be competitive with graffiti writers trying to get the most tags, the most elaborate tags, things like that. And then there's street art, which kind of evolved from graffiti, and street art is a much more broad genre that includes anything from stencils, painting, murals, installations, sculptures, any of that stuff. And then you have Earthworks, which is kind of like, you could say, the street art of nature, I guess, which is where it's art made out of natural materials in nature. So, you know, sculptures, installations made out of rocks, sticks, stones, dirt, all that stuff. So why did I want to do this project? I'm really interested in art. Those are some of my pieces along the side there. And I'm interested in public art, and I kind of was thinking about it, researching it, and thinking how I could turn it into a project. And I started to think about, like, why is it significant that public art is public? Like, why don't you just put graffiti in a museum? Well, I kind of realized that that public art is really dependent on its location and environment, and it's influenced by its environment, and it also impacts the environment where it's made, and it's all sort of related. So my thesis is that the art is inspired and influenced by its environment, and there's a constant dialogue between the art and its environment that strengthens the art, giving it purpose and life. So I came to this thesis by researching these three movements and looking at how they developed and the significant artists and pieces that they made. And then the project part of my research, I wanted to demonstrate the connection between public art and its environment by making Earthworks installations myself. So I actually went around to different parks around Newton and did installations out of like sticks and stones and things like that. So to start off with graffiti. So graffiti has been around for a long time. There's graffiti all the way back in like cave walls from like prehistoric times, I don't even know. And then there's like ancient graffiti, ancient Rome and Greece, you have graffiti, it's political and things like that. But what I was focused on was the modern graffiti movement, which started in New York City in the 1960s and 70s. So here's just a timeline to kind of give you some background on it. So before, kind of pre-1950s, you have Kilroy Was Here, which was a little graffiti and doodle that was done by soldiers during World War II. And so that, I guess you could say, was the start of modern graffiti, just writing a name on a wall and doing doodles, things like that. And then in the 1960s was the invention of spray paint and Sharpie and magic markers. So these were really important because they allowed graffiti writers to do a quick little tag without having to wait around for like paint to dry or anything like that. And then, so in the mid-1960s, a few kids just started writing their names on walls illegally, just kind of being rebellious. And one of the more famous was Taki 183. So that is his name and his street number. And he just wrote his name and street number everywhere, in trains, outside of trains, in the stations, on walls. And in 1971, a New York Times journalist tracked him down and wrote an article about him. And so after he gained recognition for writing his name, a lot of kids began to mimic this style. And so in the early 1970s, you just have all over the place, there were just kids were writing their names and street numbers, and they were started to like compete for the most number of tags and writing their names in like more difficult, hard to get places. And then so that developed where first they were just writing their names, and then they started to do outlines around it and things like that, and that developed into more complex, wild style graffiti in the mid-1970s. And a lot of this graffiti took place in the subway and on the trains, because this way the tags were going all throughout the city for everyone to see. So the 1970s and 80s, you had this whole graffiti phenomenon on all the trains in New York. And then in the 1980s, it began to spread worldwide, and it gained a lot of popularity as part of hip-hop culture. And then 1989 was when the train graffiti died down, because they started to keep the subway spray paint free and buffing them down at night, and it wasn't worth it. And now you have graffiti is really kind of a part of mainstream pop culture. There's graffiti in video games, pop art, things like that. So here's an enlarged version. These are some early tags. You can see people starting to do outlines around their names. And then that quickly evolved into these sort of tags, which are a lot more complex. And what happened was, originally they were writing these tags on the outside of trains as passengers got on and off in the stations. But they wanted to make them more elaborate, so they began to jump down into the train stations and tag the trains while they were parked, so they had more time to make a more complex tag. And then due to competition for like the best tags, they began to break into train yards at night and spend the whole night just painting the trains. And then you end up with things like this. So a significant writer that I studied was Lee Quinones, who was well known for all of his graffiti, and he was a major contributor to the first entirely painted train. It was like 10 cars. And he was different than a lot of other writers because he used block letters, and he wasn't into wild style. He really wanted people to be able to read what he was writing, and he wanted to add a message to his work. So here are some of his trains, and you can see on the middle one it says, "Stop Real Crime," and you have a little character with a gun. So things like that. And he saw the trains as a really good place to put positive messages like this, because you have a train that's going all through the city and being seen by thousands of people. And so if you put a message on it, your message gets out there. So after graffiti was sort of banned from the trains, a lot of the writers started to move to street art, and the street art movement grew a lot. And street art is basically, like I said, a lot more broad. You have stenciling and murals and all installations, all of that taking place on different walls, buildings, public areas. So one of the early street artists was Ernest Pignon-Ernest, who was actually from France, and he really reflected how street art is very connected to its location, because he would walk the streets before he installed his work and really acquaint himself with the area and look at the people, try and read about the history of the location, and really get to know it to inspire his work. So here are some examples. These big posters that he put up were really they were inspired by the people of the area. There's another example. And then back in New York City, during the same time as the graffiti movement, was John Fechner. And instead of putting tags up on walls, he was stenciling different words. that he wanted people to see the words and think about what they meant in the context of the location. So here's an example, Broken Promises, which really makes you think about the area and like what are the broken promises. And then he got really famous for doing this piece, Decay, and Ronald Reagan ended up doing, he gave a speech in front of it, and so this got him a lot of recognition, and it also brought a lot of attention to this area. This is in the Bronx, and so there's increased attention and people started to help and make it a better area. So he used the location of his work to the advantage of helping people. And then Keith Haring, who probably a lot of you have heard of, he was also a street artist in the 70s and 80s in New York. And his art was more based on drawings, little doodles. And here's a quote from his journal. "The public has a right to art. The public needs art, and it is the responsibility of a self-proclaimed artist to realize that the public needs art and not to make bourgeois art for the few and ignore the masses. I'm interested in making art to be experienced and explored by as many individuals as possible, with as many different individual ideas about the given piece, with no final meaning attached. The viewer creates the reality, the meaning, the conception of the piece. I'm merely a middleman trying to bring ideas together." So you can see that he thought that there's really no point of making art unless there were people to see it, and where's a better place to put it for people to see than out in the streets. So here are some of his pieces in the subway. These are advertisement panels that got covered up with black paper, and then he would go around with chalk and do these little doodles on them that were inspired by the people he saw and different things, random things that came into his mind, and also the other advertisements around. And then here's a piece that he did, Crack is Whack, which was inspired by the crack epidemic in New York in the 1980s. And he originally did this piece illegally, but then when everyone saw it, a lot of people really liked it and thought it had a really good positive message. And so the New York City Parks Department put it under protection. And then here's a piece he did on the Berlin Wall, which kind of goes to show that how an artist can combine art and location to his advantage to send a more powerful message. And then next is Shepard Fairey, who I'm sure a lot of you have heard of from the Obama Hope, and then when he got arrested last year in Boston. But his most famous campaign is the Obey Giant campaign, which started off with this stencil on the left, Andre the Giant Has a Posse, which was, he made a stencil of Andre the Giant, the wrestler, and just wrote this and put it on a sticker and started putting them all over the place and distributing them. So they were really like all over the place. And then it evolved into the image on the right, which is Andre the Giant and then Obey. And the idea of this was basically he wanted people to, it was kind of like false propaganda in a way, where people didn't know what exactly they were obeying or what this meant. And he mass produced them and just distributed them everywhere. And so that he used a lot of repetition, and this is all over the place. I'm sure like even around Newton there's a lot of them. And here's a quote. "The giant sticker attempts to stimulate curiosity and bring people to question both the sticker and their relationship with their surroundings. Because people are not used to seeing advertisements or propaganda for which the product or motive is not obvious, frequent and novel encounters with the sticker provoke thought and possible frustration, nevertheless revitalizing the viewer's perception and attention to detail. The sticker has no meaning, but exists only to cause people to react, to contemplate and search for meaning in the sticker. Many stickers have been peeled down by people who are annoyed by them, considering them eyesores and acts of petty vandalism, which is ironic considering the number of commercial graphic images everyone in American society is assaulted with daily." So, yeah, so he has a positive message there behind that sticker. And here's another example. He played around with propaganda and started putting, this is Mao Zedong, and started putting like a lot of different images of famous leaders and stuff with obey. So people are like, what is this? Why would we obey him? Things like that. And then Banksy, who I talked about earlier on the first slide, he's my favorite street artist. He does a lot of satirical work, and he's completely anonymous. No one knows who he is, which is kind of funny. And he says, the people who truly deface our neighborhoods are the companies that scrawl giant slogans across buildings and buses trying to make us feel inadequate unless we buy their stuff. They expect to be able to shout their message in your face from every available surface, but you're never allowed to answer back. Well, they started the fight, and the wall is the weapon of choice to hit them back. So again, he's kind of motivated by all the advertisements around and wants to fight back. And here are some of his more satirical pieces. And then here's a series of graffiti that he did on the Palestine segregation wall. And he did this totally illegally. He was with a tour guide, I read in his book, and the tour guide was like, oh yeah, sure, go do that, there's no guards. And then he came back and the tour guide was like, what, are you crazy? Like, of course there's guards, they're watching you, like, what are you doing? So there's some risky graffiti there. And then last, there's Earthworks movement. So here's an example of really early, I guess, the inspiration for Earthworks, which is the Great Serpent Mound in Ohio that was built in 1070 AD and by Native Americans. So this kind of inspired this whole movement of making art out of the land. And the leader of this movement, which began in the 1970s, was Robert Smithson. And he did it because he wanted to kind of bring awareness to the environment and our relationship to it. And what was interesting about his perception of art and location was that he categorized his works as either sites, which were installations built on site, like in nature using natural materials, or non-sites, which were natural materials taken from nature and then put in a gallery. And here's an example of one of his pieces, the half-buried woodshed, which is meant to illustrate entropy. And it kind of, you can see how in the top there, that was when it was originally built, and then it kind of like grew and grass grew over it and it evolved and transformed. And then this is his most famous piece, which is the Spiral Jetty in Great Salt Lake, Ohio. And it's just this huge jetty that you can walk out on. And it actually was built in 1971, and it got covered up when the water level rose. And then a couple of years ago, the water level went back down and it showed up again. So that also reflects the relationship between the art and its environment that's always changing and transforming. And also Andy Goldsworthy is another important Earthworks artist who only does on-site sculptures mostly, and he works with a ton of different materials and photographs all his work and wants to show how it changes over time. And here's one of his pieces using slate rock. It's an arch. And then this is my favorite. It's icicles that are held together using saliva. And then this one is feathers that are broken in half. Thought was pretty cool. So yeah, this sort of Earthworks art reflects the inherent connection between art and its environment, because the materials are taken directly from the environment and built in the environment, and then there's this connection as it all grows and changes together. And then, so my project was to build some of these Earthworks sculptures, and I planned out 5 installations to reflect the connection between art and its environment. I've currently completed 3.5, kind of. But first off, I started doing these and I was like, oh, this will be fun. I'll just take some rocks and sticks and it'll be really easy, but it's not. because, okay, this is something like some leaves in a hole, and it looks like, what is this? He just arranged leaves, but it's actually equivalent of Mona Lisa, in my opinion. That's like really hard to do. So here's my first one, which I'm not so crazy about, but it was hard because I got out there and I had all these sticks and rocks and all this stuff, and I didn't know what to do with it. And I didn't have string or like tape or scissors or any of the normal stuff. So it's kind of abstract, I guess, but I just started bending sticks and connecting them. And then this next one worked out a little better. It's, I guess, a sort of fort type thing in Cabot Woods, using sticks that are leaned together. And here's one using stones arranged in different shapes. And then here's the half of an installation, which are some balanced rocks. And so I just took rocks around and started balancing them and trying to get them to stay. And this was just kind of fun. Here's my Earthworks tag. I just put this next to some of my art and thought it looked cool, so I was going to include it. But so that's my project.
Time for a Q&A.
Yeah.
I'm curious, you mentioned Banksy is a favorite artist and you really like the icicles piece. I'm curious what some of your own favorite images are, what some of your other favorite images, and you know, why they're appealing to you.
Banksy is one of my favorites, mostly just he's funny. His work, he wants people to think it's funny. He does all sorts, like even some of his sculptures, he'll like, some of them he'll like make little like shark's fins and just stick them in puddles and stuff, or like ponds. So I just like him because I find his work really funny and entertaining. And then I thought the Earthworks, Andy Goldsworthy, I think that's really cool because he's taking these random things that you usually don't think of as art and putting them together into different shapes that you would never like really expect. I also like Shepard Fairey a lot. I think it's really cool how he mixes the stencils with sort of collaging and puts them all over the place. So, yeah.
With the exception of Ferry, how do these people make money, if at all?
Some of them do gallery exhibitions. Like Banksy did a gallery exhibition, I think in California a few years ago, where, I mean, he's anonymous, so I guess he wasn't there, but they took pictures of his work, and he also did some fine art and put it up. And he also has a movie out right now, actually called Exit Through the Gift Shop, about street art. Herring also does a mix of fine art and street art, so he makes money through that and different kind of pop-based things that he puts out there. And then Graffiti, I guess, I'm not sure, they don't really make so much money from their art, or they probably lose money, but
unless they sell t-shirts.
Yeah.
This is called Exit Through the Gift Shop?
Yeah.
Yes.
Is that West Newton right now?
Yeah, it is. It was just reviewed last week in the Globe, so was your picture of if this was framed.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, Banksy just came through Boston about 2 weekends ago, so yeah.
Only his words.
Or they don't know if they saw him.
Now, what are your plans with the street art and Earthworks?
Well, the Earthworks, I guess it started out as just kind of like, I thought for my senior project I probably wouldn't get away with like going out and doing graffiti or like street art, so I thought Earthworks was a safe bet. And I actually found that it was really fun to do, and it was a lot more challenging than the normal sort of art that I'm used to, because you don't have all the materials that that I'm used to. So I actually really enjoyed that, and I also enjoyed doing public installations. It's kind of fun. There were like people walking by being like, "What is this? What are you doing?" So that was fun.
Did
And-
people join you in any way, or did they just?
I don't think so, unless maybe I'll go back and see like other ones around it.
Can I
Yeah.
just ask, on your own installations, did you think ahead about what you wanted to use? Or did you just kind of decide, all right, I'm going to show up at Cabot Woods, get inspired, and see what's around? Like, what was your thinking around how you approached those different?
I had some plans in mind that I kind of sketched out, but then I actually got there and totally did something different. Cause like I'd make a plan and then like based on like the fort kind of one, I had a fort in mind using the structure was based on different trees and stuff, but then there's no like perfect formation of trees that you can just go find and build something. So I had to change that one around. And a lot of it was just kind of inspired by once I got all the materials together and started playing with them, it came together.
What are you doing next year?
I'm going to Colorado College and hopefully doing some art out there.
Yes, that's great. Different environment.
Yeah.
Did you get to see the Shepherd Berry exhibit at the ICA?
Yeah. It was really cool. Yeah. My mom's a big Shepherd Berry fan too. So I went with her.
I know someone that did scrape off one of the stickers and has it framed in his house.
Really? There's one,
That's fantastic.
yeah. Once you see it and know about it, you start seeing them like all over the place. There's one like on the stop sign down the street from my house. I don't know where it came from, but
Be fun to know where the source, where they came from.
yeah. And when he did his gallery exhibit last year, he put up a lot of street art, but he ended up getting arrested on the way to his exhibit, if you remember. So I don't know if he'll be back anytime soon.
Boston wasn't very welcome.
Yeah.